and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, Presidency transmits the new National Minimum Wage Bill to both chambers of the National Assembly for passage into law. Federal government set to scale up its revenue generation drive through review of value-added tax on luxury items, among other strategies. The remains of former Chief of Defence Staff Air Chief Marshal Alex Bade laid to rest at the National Military Cemetery in Abuja amid tributes. And Venezuelans take to the streets in protest against President Maduro as US President Donald Trump backs opposition leader Juan Guaido as interim president.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's Bonny Light and Kwa Ibo crude hit their highest offer level in 4 years on supply shortage from its peers and strong demand from European and Asian refiners.
And on sports news tonight, hopes of finding Cardiff City's Emiliano Sala alive seems to be fading as rescuers express concern that chances of finding the player are very slim.
And from the nation's capital, House of Representatives holds bill seeking to permit members of the Civilian Joint Task Force to bear arms in the fight against insurgency.
The demand for a new minimum wage is on the path to being a reality as the Presidency has transmitted the new minimum wage bill to the National Assembly. The President's Senior Special Advisor on National Assembly Matters, Ita Enang, confirmed this to Channels Television, saying that the document was sent to both chambers of the National Assembly today. The move is coming a day after the National Council of State approved the sum of 27,000 naira as the new national minimum wage, but the federal government says it will top it up to make it 30,000. Senator Enang, however, did not give details of the content of the transmitted bill, but it perhaps comes in the nick of time, as promised by the federal government. Meanwhile, organised labour has kicked against the 27,000 naira minimum wage approved for workers by the National Council of States, vowing to resist the decision. In its reaction to the decision, Labour insisted it will not entertain a renegotiation of the recommendations by the tripartite committee, vowing that the struggle for the 30,000 naira minimum wage would continue at the National Assembly. The NLC had staged protests in different parts of the country on January the 8th to pressure the government on the need to urgently transmit the bill to the National Assembly for passage. The Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, has given a hint on a likely increase in value-added tax before the end of 2019. Now, this will be after due consultation with the National Assembly and will be charged on luxury items. The Minister, who was speaking at the launch of the Revenue Growth Initiative, which is targeted at improving revenue sources for the government, explains that the move has become imperative owing to the fiscal challenges the government is confronted with in providing infrastructure for its people.
Statistics from the African Tax Administration Forum shows that countries such as Ghana, Uganda, Swaziland, Cameroon and Rwanda have a tax-to-GDP ratio of 15.9%, 10.8%, 15.3%, 16.7% and 16.7% respectively. This, however, is not the case for Nigeria, which has just about 6.1%. How to ensure a change in this narrative is why government officials are meeting.
The first thematic area is on achieving sustainable revenue generation to optimally collect revenues so we always maintain fiscal buoyancy and fiscal resilience. The second thematic area is on identifying new revenue streams and enhancing the enforcement with regards to revenue collection on our existing revenue streams.
One of the measures to be taken by the government to improve its revenue base beginning from this year will be through a revised value-added tax regime and will affect the importation of yachts and private jets. There will also be an increase in excise duties, especially on carbonated drinks.
There will be a VAT increase. During the course of 2019, we will have clarity as to which items and what the rate will be, and we will have to take a request to the National Assembly for amendment before it takes into effect.
There's no reason one after the other, the heads of revenue-generating agencies give account of how they fared in 2018.
before June of this year.
This will, however, be followed by an aggressive tax administration for the year 2019.
One of the first things that we're trying to do is to close the legal loopholes and ensure that people do not take advantage of not updated tax laws or policies to beat the system. This is expected to be concluded in the next 6 to 11 months.
In achieving this objective, the federal government is considering an increase in revenue incentives for agencies that play key roles in revenue generation. This, in its opinion, will serve as a boost for them to do more.
Now let's take a deeper look at the new revenue generation drive. I'm now being joined on the News at 10 by a partner and head commercial practice, Anderson Tax Nigeria, Chinedu Ezomike. Thanks a lot for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much, Ijoma.
VAT, that revised, you're already smiling, revised value-added tax. Is this really the way, and is it the only way, for them to generate revenue at this time?
Okay, so before I answer your question directly, let me tell you where the government is coming from.
Okay.
Clearly, we're in a revenue crisis. Like you read in your news, the Labour wants more money, ASU is on strike, we want to build infrastructure and all that. We have been borrowing in an unsustainable manner. So government really needs to increase the revenue generation. And one of the sustainable ways of making sure the government has enough revenue is taxation. We have been relying on oil, but we don't have control over the oil prices. So definitely we need more taxes. However, is it really necessary to have new taxes? I don't think so. I think we have existing tax laws, which the government themselves have said that we don't have enough number of people paying taxes. Even the rich people that the VAT is supposed to target have not been paying the existing taxes. So you need to enforce the existing laws. A lot of effort has gone into this already. We had the VAT program, which is tax amnesty program we had last year. The idea was that after the VAT program, the government would then go ahead to enforce tax laws and make sure that people start paying taxes. I think that is the way to go.
Okay, well, let me ask you. You talked about the rich, and we heard that it will affect importation of jets and yachts. I mean, how many people have those? But looking at the increase in excise duties on carbonated drinks, for instance, we know how Nigerians like to party. Weddings. Why is this coming at this time? Because the bigger question is there is nothing in terms of cushioning the effect of people having less cash. But then the way they see it is this is more money being taken away from the little that you have already.
Absolutely. And again, going back to what government is thinking, this is a normal trend, global trends, where people are beginning to tax what they call sugar tax. So carbonated drinks, things that have excess sugar in them, you're trying to put tax on them, one, to generate revenue, two, to also control consumption. But I agree with you that this may not necessarily be the time to implement such. I mean, the economy is still barely growing, just around 2% and all that. We're talking about job losses and increase in unemployment and all that. I don't think we need any new taxes at this point. I think we should stay the course, stay with what we're already doing, which I think is working. I mean, at the last time we heard that the number of taxpayers have increased from about 14 to about 19 million within 2 years. I think that is remarkable. I think what the FIRS and the other tax authorities are doing is already working. I think we should stay course and just increase tax revenue based on the existing tax laws. Yeah,
but you keep talking about increasing tax, and that gets people a bit jittery. Looking at the over 8 trillion that we're looking for the budget, etc., will this taxation, this one we're seeing now, be up to that? Is this the only thing that will be done for us to generate this huge revenue that we're looking for right now? Why can't the government look inwards? Look at their spending or any other thing besides people paying more?
Okay. Now, taxation is a social contract between the government and the people. When the people are supposed to own the government, so ideally the people are supposed to fund the government. And it actually follows that if people fund the government, they demand more accountability from the government. It is unlikely that government by itself will decide to cut its expenditure or cut its salaries or senators and all that. It has to be demanded by the people. Maybe when people pay more taxes, they will demand for accountability from the government.
Are you sure that is going to work, really?
That's what I said, maybe.
Because some of the, they keep saying, oh, we have the lowest rate, VAT and all that. You're looking at examples in countries where taxation works properly and the people actually get something from the taxes that they pay. But when you use that to compare with what we're going through right now, that we're not in that same position. So I don't buy the argument.
We're not in the same position, but we want to get there. Now, just let me walk back a little bit. Government will have a budget of 8 trillion. By government's own estimation, the revenue is supposed to be around 7 trillion. Out of that 7 trillion revenue, you have about 4 trillion that is supposed to go to recurrent. You have about 2 trillion that is going to debt service. So to implement the 2 trillion budget for capital expenditure, you are going to borrow again this year. It is not sustainable. Money has to come from somewhere. The question is, where will it come from? The oil revenue, we know where it is. We don't have any control over that. Where else can it come from? It has to be from taxes.
All right, thank you so much, partner and head commercial practice at Anderson Tax Nigeria, Chinedu Ezomike. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and breaking that down for us on the news at 10 tonight.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on now. And in the meantime, the House of Representatives has commenced a debate on the 2019 budget after postponing it twice in the last 1 week. And the lawmakers, however, observed disparities in some of the figures in the budget, but it did not prevent them from debating on it. Our correspondent, Terry Ikumi, reports.
Once again, the Green Chamber is relatively empty, owing to the approaching elections. This, however, does not prevent lawmakers present from delving into serious matters which require legislative attention.
And 4 trillion, 38 billion.
The main business of the day is the 2019 appropriation bill, which was stepped down twice to allow members properly study the document.
The total sum of 8 trillion, 826 billion. 636,578,915 naira only.
Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues...
A lawmaker draws the attention of the House to some errors, but the Speaker does not think the errors are enough to halt the debate.
The budget is 462.2 billion in Part C, which is the recurrent expenditure. But when you go to the summary of the budget, you by MDS, number 41, code 0518, personnel now has changed to about 539.6 billion.
Basically, we're discussing the general principles of the budget by virtue of the provisions of our rules at this time. So we'll talk about general principles. While I'm sure we're not finishing, we will not conclude on the debate today. I'll direct relevant committee chairman to liaise with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and Planning to ensure that by tomorrow, before we conclude the debate on the budget, we have the reconciled figures.
Following his ruling, the debate continues.
I will plead with my colleagues. Let's painstakingly look at this when the MDAs come during the budget defense, so that at the end of the day, we are not seen to be in bed with the executive to throw Nigerian people under the bus.
There is a need to separate the budget that concerns agriculture from the budget that concerns other sectors of the economy.
The budget debate is expected to continue by the next legislative day. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
In part two, after the break, absence of the former governor of Abia State, Ojuzo Carlo, stalls his trial at the Federal High Court in Lagos. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.